How would you teach about electricity and circuits to a Year 6 class at the start of the school year? Zoe Lowe, not a science specialist, agreed to let her cameras in. She's chatted through how the lesson went for teaching assistant Linda Williams.
It seemed to work quite well there. Kind of difficult.
They did. I think what surprised me was that although we'd gone through all the symbols and we'd drawn it on the board and we'd all done the boards before the show me, when we actually came to draw it and they were thinking about doing the circuit, drawing, thinking, they'd all forgotten how to do the symbols in that short time. So we had to get the pictures out and we actually had to plan it out.
Did that help them then?
Definitely, yeah. We put the pictures and the symbols by it and then they could see, they could identify.
Oh, excellent, that's good.
Zoe viewed the tape herself and now looks back at what went on with Science Inspector Steve Davis.
Right then, Zoe, have you managed to get rid of the buzzing sound from your ears?
Only just the 3-second rule worked well, I think, today.
If we go through the lesson and look at the structure of the lesson, you started off with a starter that involved a card sort looking at the circuit symbols and matching them with the actual components. Could you run through why you're doing that? Because a lot of people might think, that's normally just Year 6 work straight off.
That will go down. No, there's only 3. One cell would be that then, wouldn't it? Then it'd be that one. Those.
We have a slight overlap in Year 5 and 6 that sometimes towards the end of a Year 5 topic the teachers may sort of bring something else in from the Year 6, which almost gives us a head start. We sort of sometimes overlap the topics. And I knew that it had been something that had been covered before, but obviously wasn't sure as to how much the children had remembered. Right. So I sort of used it for that purpose, really.
I see, yeah. I mean, I thought it was a very successful starter, actually, because you were able to identify straight away that there was a bit of a problem.
Yeah.
Particularly noticed that we had one or two mixing up the bulb and the buzzer, and I thought you went into that quite nicely to sort of clear up that misconception.
Well, I tried to give them the opportunity, as always, to sort of see what they've done wrong. They justified them quite well.
That looks like it's the bulb attached to the bottom. You think that's upside down? Yeah. That's the bottom of that, and that's the bottom of the bulb. We're thinking that's a hazard.
A hazard?
Yeah, because the bulb's kind of like a warning. Gets hot, isn't it?
Okay, and interesting hazard work.
I mean, is that a tactic that you use quite a lot in terms of getting them to explain to you why they came up with a particular solution?
Yeah, because you'll find that they, at that point, will probably recognise what they've done wrong as they're explaining it. Show me, please, what your pair have chosen as their bulb. Some people have chosen this. Some people have chosen this. Okay, so we have two choices. Some differences of opinion. And I have to say that those of you who had managed to work that one were correct. So, unlucky if you chose that one. I was very pleased with the way you were thinking about it and the way you were trying to sort of justify your choice.
You then use, again, what I think is another good tactic, and it gives you an overall impression as to how the whole group are getting on when you use the small whiteboards then to test whether that had really gone in or not.
Please draw the correct symbol for a motor. Show me boards. Instead of drawing, perhaps, a motor, I use, as you showed me, this symbol. Why might I do that? Emily, what do you think?
Because it's quicker.
It's quicker? Any other reasons? Why would that be a benefit, then, for somebody to use a symbol rather than a picture?
Because if you drew the motor, people might draw the motor differently. And because the M with the circle around it might be international, an international
Brilliant.
sign.
I think it was Maddie who came out and talked about electrical bits, and you sort of jumped on that straight away.
Could it be that if you were writing something down about electrical bits, and would it
bits?
just be, well, like bulb or something like, yeah.
Okay, Okay.
circuits
Yeah.
or something like that.
Okay.
And could it just be like a freehand type thing?
Well, it has to be. I mean, the keywords on the board are to help with, often with spelling, but in particular with understanding. So you can definitely match a component, that was the word you were looking for before, a component, to a picture or to an actual object. Okay.
Now, it was at this point then that we returned to the learning objective. Now, can you run through why you didn't actually state at the start of the lesson what the learning objective was going to be?
We tend to push the learning objective, and it's there at the beginning, and we make sure that we refer back to it. When I don't use it, I kind of like the children to be more involved in the lesson to show that they know what it is that we're going to learn, and again, not directly me telling them this is it. Okay, lesson objective. It's missing. What do we think our lesson objective is going to be?
I noticed with the questioning, it seemed almost to be differentiated, I thought. I mean, was that deliberate?
With the lower ability groups, or with children that perhaps are not always as involved in the lesson as other children, you want to make sure that they still have that input. And for Coral to see her own response developed upon was nice for her, because she knew that she was on the right lines. Coral.
Is it electric circuits?
Something to do with electric circuits, that's a good start. John.
To identify components of an electrical circuit.
To identify components, brilliant. Keyword, fantastic. It was good to see the progression that was made from the children to say, we know what a learning objective is, we know that it's important every lesson, we know that it's what we need to achieve.
The point about that learning objective as well is that it really brought you and firmly embedded you into the Year 6 work, wasn't it? It sort of, we've got the circuit symbols, we're now going to use them.
You are the power source of my electrical circuit. Ben, you are our switch. Ah. Okay, so Gina, can you show me what you might look like if you were a bulb that had no electricity running through you and no power source and you weren't working? You're a working bulb now, show me.
Can you run through why you did that at this particular point?
The activities themselves when you get into electricity can be very much sort of sat and doing, and I do often like to use role play to get the children involved in it, to get them sort of a part of what they're doing. Please show me a working circuit, Ben. Excellent. So what have the rest of you got to think about now? Because your switch is now working. Your switch is closed. Well done, Gina. Good stuff. So we've passed round to Gina's happy. Look very lit up, very smiley. Working away. Trying to promote all the time is this different learning styles. There were some children in the class who would have benefited from actually doing the activity, and the kinesthetic learners, and the visual learners who can also see it, because they can't always see it when it's in front of them on a circuit board. So that was quite useful.
I thought it worked very well.
No, I did it wrong. I know, I got it. Let there be light.
And we've got this couple here that really sort of worked very hard on this problem that they had, where it turned out that one of the leads was broken.
Can't be the batteries. All that. It's got to be one of these crocodile clips. Get rid of all those components. It was.
I like the way they came up with a solution to the problem.
Well, they found it very difficult, and it's very frustrating for them because they can perhaps see other children have moved on. But for them, they actually, almost the pleasure they'd got from realising what they'd done and how they'd got there, and at the end they had a working circuit. It was fantastic.
Yes.
But that took them a lot longer, but was perhaps just as valuable as what the other children had learned in the same amount of time that had moved on.
How do you think you're going to work next lesson with a number of these groups that were introducing short circuits?
Yeah, I was quite interesting because I hadn't brought it in. It was very interesting to see the number of pairs that had brought that out of their activity. For me, it would have to be, either on an OHT, I would show them one, or perhaps using a program such as Crocodile Clips, which allows you to give a, ICT-based image and connect the circuit for them, and it's very visual because bulbs will blow and things like that, and they can see that. And I would definitely, and almost a teaching point, but almost let them see it, so that they can then say, oh, well, we won't do that next time, and take it away with them. So it would definitely, probably a start of the next lesson that I had to look at and get rid of that out of the way.
And presumably be introducing the safety aspects into this as well, that if you're a short circuit, then wires can become very hot.
We discussed them in safety, electricity, a little bit, because the children are obviously very aware of it. This would be the next step of that, would be to introduce that and make sure that we've got a full understanding.
Press that quite firmly, don't you?
So there won't be a gap.
3 circuits.
Brilliant. Yeah, if we don't press it hard enough, what will happen?
It won't turn off. It won't turn off. No, on.
That's right, won't turn on. Good girl. Well, shall we try and have a look and see if we can work out how exactly we're going to do it, right? How do you think we're going to connect everything up? What's...
We're going to make it around the edge.
Yeah,
We're going to
brilliant.
get these and put them around the
Okay, right, so we'll have a go then. Let's take...
I was really interested here in the way in which your teaching assistant was working with that small group. She was using those visual aids that you'd used as part of your starter. Now, is this something that she would do on a regular basis?
Yeah, we always try to make sure that if there are any visual aids that we use, and it tends to be sort of very often in the lesson, it is something that she can then sort of build upon with that group or within any particular small group. To reinforce an activity, the visual aids are essential.
Now, we moved then from this practical session and with buzzers and all sorts of things going, and then you tried to bring all of this together into a plenary to draw together all of those ideas.
Those are the questions up on the board. Have a good look. Okay. Go.
I'll do it first, yeah, you asked me. One thing you've learned tonight, how to make a circuit.
And then you had this strategy of pair and share. Is that something you use very often?
Yeah, I think discussion is important, and it has to be not just the children sat listening to me. It has to be them listening to each other's ideas, because sometimes they will get through to each other on a level that I can't reach because I'm not one of them.
Well, I've learned how to draw and do the symbols correctly. I found it difficult when we tried to collect them all together.
I've learned all the signals, the signs for it, the symbols for it, for the things. And I found difficult getting everything done with the pictures and the writing. And
The getting over sort of the embarrassment of speaking about what you thought, I do that by sort of suggesting tell what your partner thought, and they quite like that. It gets some discussion. There isn't any time for them not to talk about it, and most of the time they're quite enthusiastic, want to share what they've heard. And it also promotes memory skills, all sorts of things in there, and it always works really well.
One thing he found difficult was trying to put the buzzer into the circuit.
Excellent, yeah.
And what he'd like to know is how to put the buzzer in.
My own perception was that during that session, while they were talking with each other, the learning process was continuing even then. They were learning from each other.
They probably hadn't realised, they probably hadn't realised the question
Yeah.
of what I'd found difficult. When they sat and thought about it, it then helps them think, well, what I'd like to do next, and it all sort of links in quite nicely.
Yes. Now, of course, the obvious question now is, where are you going to take this next? What's going to happen from here?
Well, there was quite a few interesting sort of questions that the children came up with. And what do you think Rob wants? What did Rob say he wants to find out next?
How batteries get their power.
How batteries have their power inside them. Something we could look at, isn't it? Something we could definitely research and find out about. Excellent, you two. Now we understand our circuit boards. Now hopefully we've got our circuit symbols in place in our knowledge. We can then move that on to investigate more about the components and what we can find out. So that's where I'd like to go.
Right, and presumably you'd be looking at varying brightnesses and speeds of motors, all of those sorts of
thickness
things
of
we
wire,
brought in.
all that sort of thing, all in there. Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
So we pass around. So Gina's happy. You look very lit up, very smiling.
Let's do it in our back.
Let there be light.